What happens when a powerful black woman quietly refuses to be erased 30,000 feet in the air? Dr. Celeste Warner, a calm yet commanding CEO, had worked her entire life to earn her place at the table, or in this case, her rightful seat in first class. But just minutes after boarding her flight, a white male passenger demanded her seat and the crew sided with him. Was it a misunderstanding or something far more insidious? Why was she the one questioned? Why did the staff assume she didn't belong? And what happens when the woman they tried to move is the CEO of one of the most influential clean tech companies in America? This is not just a story about airline injustice. It's about dignity. It's about power that doesn't need to shout. And it's about what happens when the world is forced to listen because someone refused to move. If you're ready for a story that will stir your heart, challenge your mind, and remind you of the quiet strength behind real change, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's step into the cabin and witness everything unfold. The hum of the espresso machine broke the silence just before dawn. Dr. Celeste Warner stood barefoot in her kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a mug that bore a fading inscription, "Rise even when the world tries to sit you down." A gift from her mother 3 years ago, just after Celeste closed her Series A funding round for Helix Technologies. She never drank from anything else on mornings like this morning's when the stakes were quietly enormous. Outside her condo window in uptown Charlotte, the city light still twinkled in defiance of the sun. The air inside was crisp, cool, scented faintly with lavender and peppermint oil rituals that made her mornings feel more like armor than rest. She checked her phone again. 4:43 a.m. No new emails, no missed calls, just a single notification reminder from her calendar. Flight 2187 to Denver Gate B6, 7:05 a.m. Below it, a meeting blocked at 2:00 p.m. with Westridge Capital. It wasn't just a meeting, it was the meeting. The one that could unlock $60 million in Series C funding. The one that could scale Helix from a rising startup into a global name in clean energy AI solutions. Celeste wasn't nervous, not anymore. At 38, she had already made peace with the pressure. But that didn't mean she didn't feel its weight. She sipped slowly, allowing the bitterness of the dark roast to ground her. In the stillness, a voice echoed softly in her memory. Her mother, Ruth Warner, standing behind her in their childhood kitchen in Durham. "You'll have to walk through doors they won't open for you, but don't wait for them. Push, if you must, gracefully but firmly." She held those words close, now more than ever. After a quick shower, Celeste selected her outfit with methodical precision. A charcoal gray wrap dress, professional but fluid, low, sturdy heels, a deep burgundy coat tailored to her silhouette. No flashy jewelry, just the gold bracelet she always wore engraved with the initials CW, a quiet reminder of who she was before the titles and the funding rounds. Her natural curls were pulled into a neat bun, controlled but not suppressed. It had taken her years to stop straightening her hair for board meetings. Years to realize the lie that professionalism had a texture. This morning, she let her coils stand tall. She packed light a leather laptop sleeve, her Kindle, one small roller bag. Her driver, Noah Blake, texted that he was downstairs right on time. By 5:15 a.m., they were on the way to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. "You ready to change the game again?" Noah asked from the front seat, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Celeste smiled faintly, one pitch at a time. The car ride was uneventful. Early morning traffic was still sparse. They passed the glistening Queen City skyline, quietly promising the day to come. At the airport, TSA pre-check was smooth, though a security officer did glance at her badge twice, then at her, then back at her carry-on like something didn't add up. She noticed it, but didn't react. She'd long since stopped correcting every subtle assumption. The AeroSouth Airlines lounge offered a peaceful reprieve. She sat near the windows, sipping warm chamomile tea and reviewing the final pitch deck on her iPad. The talking points were tight, the projections solid. The story she was about to tell had been years in the making. At 6:20 a.m., boarding was called. Celeste gathered her things, smoothed her dress, and walked toward Gate B6. "Good morning, Dr. Warner," the gate agent said warmly. "You're in seat 2A this morning." "Correct," Celeste nodded. "That's right." She scanned her mobile pass and stepped down the jet bridge, mentally running through the key investor profiles. She didn't notice the shift in air pressure. Not yet. She was still in pitch mode, focused, measured, exact. The cabin of Flight 2187 to Denver was dimly lit. First class had already begun to fill with passengers, most of them men in suits, half already plugged into their devices. And now she turned right, moving toward her seat. And then she stopped. There, in 2A, her seat sat a man she'd never seen before. White, early 40s, navy blazer, no tie, posture spread comfortably across the plush leather. He was scrolling his phone, earbuds dangling around his neck. A faint whiff of cologne and entitlement hung in the air. Celeste double-checked her boarding pass. 2A. There was no mistake. She cleared her throat gently. "Excuse me. I believe you're in my seat." The man barely looked up. "I don't think so," he muttered, still scrolling. Celeste kept her tone neutral. "I'm assigned to 2A. Could you check your boarding pass?" He sighed, finally raising his eyes, glancing at her face, then at the seat. "There are plenty of other open seats. You can take one of those," he said, waving vaguely to the row behind. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. The old familiar tension began to bloom just behind the ribs, where frustration and dignity wrestled for space. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation," she said, holding out her phone. "But this seat is assigned to me. It's clearly marked here." The man Logan Pierce, as she would later learn, shrugged. "Look, sweetheart, I'm already settled. It's just a seat. Don't make this a thing." Celeste blinked once. Slow and deliberate. The tone, the patronizing smile, the implication. She opened her mouth to respond. But just then, a flight attendant approached, blonde ponytail, crisp uniform, bright name tag, Tina Mallory. "Is there a problem here?" Tina asked cheerfully. Celeste turned to her with relief. "Yes. I believe this gentleman is in my assigned seat 2A. I've confirmed it on my boarding pass." Tina smiled at Logan first, then back at Celeste. "Well, ma'am," she began, her voice lowering slightly, "it looks like he's already seated. Would you mind just taking another seat so we can board smoothly?" Celeste's smile faded. "I'd prefer to sit in the seat I paid for," she said simply. Tina's expression flickered, just for a second. That was the moment the balance shifted and the wheels, ever so quietly, began to turn. Celeste stood quietly, her spine straight as ever, yet the muscles at the base of her neck had begun to tighten. She kept her hands by her sides, fingers lightly touching the smooth strap of her leather portfolio. The air in the cabin had shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just heavier. The weight of being observed, of being questioned, of not being believed. Tina, the flight attendant, still wore her practiced smile, but her eyes had turned calculating. Celeste had seen that look before, in investor meetings when she corrected men mid-sentence. In boardrooms when she questioned projections. In airports when TSA agents asked her to step aside, even while others walked through. "I understand your concern," Tina said lightly, now directing her voice to the surrounding passengers more than to Celeste herself. "But he's already seated. We really need to keep boarding moving." Celeste's voice stayed low, clear. "This seat was purchased in my name. It's assigned to me. I'm not moving." Logan Pierce leaned back in the chair like it belonged to him, crossing one leg over the other, exhaling as if exhausted by her persistence. He turned toward Tina and gave her a look that suggested he'd dealt with unreasonable women before. "I'm not trying to cause a scene," he said, now performing a kind of mild exasperation. "I sat down where I was told. Maybe there was a mistake, but she's being aggressive." Celeste turned her eyes toward him, calm, still, but steel beneath. "Assertive," she said, "not aggressive. Don't confuse the two." Someone coughed nearby, not a real cough, but one of those forced sounds that signals discomfort. Attention had shifted. Passengers in rows 1 through 4 were now quietly listening, some glancing over the tops of their newspapers or phones. Tina shifted her stance. "Ma'am, there is an open seat in 4C. It's also first class. I'd be happy to bring you a complimentary beverage once you're seated." Celeste tilted her head slightly. "You're asking me to accept a different seat, even though I've done nothing wrong, while allowing him to remain in a seat he didn't pay for and hasn't verified." Tina pressed her lips together. "It's just to avoid delaying the flight." Celeste let the silence hang there. "That's the logic," she said finally. "Punish the person asking for what they rightfully paid for, so the person who took it without permission doesn't get upset." Tina's smile grew thin. Logan chuckled under his breath. "Look," he said, "she can have the seat. I just don't want to be late. You know how these things get blown out of proportion." Celeste didn't flinch, then move. But Logan didn't move. Instead, he pulled his phone from his coat pocket and opened what looked like an electronic boarding pass. He waved it toward Tina, but not in Celeste's direction. "See," he said, "right here." Celeste leaned slightly to catch a glimpse. It was fast, blurry, but she saw enough to note that the seat listed on the screen didn't say 2A. It said 28E. Tina gave the screen the briefest glance, then nodded. "Looks fine to me," she said. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "You didn't actually read it." Tina's face flushed. Another passenger, a black woman seated in 1C, turned slightly in her seat. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes met Celeste's for a moment. There was understanding there, recognition, not of faces, but of experiences. A long pause passed. Tina seemed frozen in place. Logan crossed his arms. Celeste stood her ground. Then, from farther back in the plane, another flight attendant approached. This one was a tall man, mid-30s, short brown hair, a name tag reading Mark Jensen. "Everything all right up here?" he asked. "Apparently not," Celeste replied before Tina could speak. "There seems to be confusion about seating assignments." Tina jumped in quickly. "It's fine. Mark, just a small mix-up." "Not fine," Celeste corrected. "This gentleman is occupying my seat and refusing to verify his boarding pass properly. I've shown mine multiple times." Mark turned to Logan. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Logan hesitated. "I showed it already." "I'd like to see it myself," Mark replied, firmer now, grudgingly. Logan pulled it back up and handed over his phone. Mark studied it, expression unreadable. "Sir," he said, This says 28E. Logan scoffed. It must be a glitch. I booked first class. I always book first class. But that's not what your ticket says. Well, I was upgraded, Logan said quickly. There's no record of that. Celeste stayed silent, letting them work through the lies. Tina, shifting awkwardly, looked to Mark. What should we do? Mark turned to Logan. You need to move to your assigned seat. Sir? A few passengers nearby clapped softly, just a couple of slow claps. A man in 3A murmured, About time, but Logan didn't move. This is ridiculous, he muttered. It's not that big of a deal. She could have just taken another seat and saved everyone time. Celeste spoke, her voice even, no louder than before. It is a big deal, because what you're saying is that my comfort, my time, and my dignity matter less than your convenience. Logan's face flushed. You don't need to make this about race. Celeste looked at him directly. I haven't mentioned race, but if that's where your mind goes, maybe you should ask yourself why. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Heavier. Tina cleared her throat. Let me check with the captain. She turned and walked toward the cockpit. Mark gave Celeste a small nod before moving aside. Celeste stood, still waiting. Her seat still occupied. Her day still hanging in the balance. It wasn't the first time she had been challenged in a place she'd earned the right to be. It likely wouldn't be the last. But something inside her, a core forged from years of silent dismissals and polite disrespect, told her this time was different. This time, she wasn't just defending herself. She was defending every woman like her who had been quietly displaced and told to be grateful for any seat. A young woman stepped forward from row 5. She looked about 20, wore a bright scarf, and held a phone in one hand. Hi, she said gently to Celeste. I've been filming since the beginning. I hope that's okay. I thought people should see. Celeste blinked, momentarily stunned. What's your name, Marisol? She replied. Marisol Reyes. Celeste nodded slowly. Thank you. Marisol. Behind her. Someone else raised a voice. She's right. I saw it too. He took something from the seat pocket before he sat down. Looked like a laptop sleeve. It was a voice from the back. Male, Latin accent. Logan shifted in his seat. Celeste's expression didn't change, but something in her chest lifted. The tide was shifting. She hadn't moved, and this time, she wouldn't have to. Captain Frank Dalton looked every bit the seasoned pilot. Salt and pepper hair combed neatly back, crisp navy uniform, gold stripes clean across his shoulders. When he stepped out of the cockpit, the cabin instinctively hushed. Passengers who had been murmuring fell silent. A few even straightened in their seats, as if by habit. Authority had arrived. Tina Mallory trailed close behind him, visibly relieved to pass the situation upward. The captain looked first to Tina, then to Logan Pierce, still lounging in seat 2A, and finally to Celeste Warner, who stood beside him with calm precision, hands still holding her leather laptop sleeve. Her posture was dignified, her expression composed, but anyone paying attention would notice the flicker of weariness behind her eyes. What seems to be the issue? Captain Dalton asked, voice professional but clipped, as though he'd been called to 100 situations like this and already had his answer ready. This passenger, Tina began, nodding towards Celeste, claims that Mr. Pierce is in her seat, but he says he was told to sit here. She's refusing to take another seat, and we're trying not to delay boarding. Celeste didn't move. She held out her phone to the captain. My boarding pass. Captain. Clearly states two-way. I checked in early, passed through security, and boarded with Group 1. He took my seat and refuses to move. Despite multiple chances to do so, the captain took the phone, glanced at it, then turned to Logan. "Sir, do you have your boarding pass?" Logan sat up straighter, as if only now realizing he was being asked directly. "I showed it to the flight attendant already. It's probably a system glitch. I booked first class. This must have been reassigned somehow." Celeste spoke before the captain could respond. "He's assigned to 28E. I saw it. Another passenger has it on video. He also moved my personal item from this seat and placed it in the overhead bin before sitting down." Captain Dalton paused, processing. His jaw tensed slightly. "I'll need to see your boarding pass, sir," he said again to Logan. With a reluctant huff, Logan pulled out his phone and flashed the screen briefly. "Please hand it to me," the captain said, firmer now. Grumbling, Logan did as told. The captain looked at the screen, then at the paper manifest Tina passed him from the galley. "This clearly shows you're assigned to 28E, he said. Logan opened his mouth to object, but the captain cut him off. "You are not upgraded. The system shows no changes. You are not assigned to first class." "Must be a system error," Logan replied, shaking his head. "I'm a platinum flyer. I've been upgraded before." "It's not a system error," Celeste said quietly. "It's a sense of entitlement. You assumed no one would challenge you." A few nearby passengers murmured in agreement. Marisol Reyes, the young woman with the scarf who had been filming, stepped forward. I have video of him entering the cabin, removing something from 2A, and sitting down. He looked around first, then sat. There was no confusion. The captain looked to her. "You're willing to share that footage?" "Yes," she replied. "I already told the other attendant. It's clear." The captain's face didn't shift, but the way he inhaled showed he'd made a decision. "Mr. Pierce, you'll need to return to your assigned seat in 28E. Logan leaned forward. "This is outrageous. You're siding with her just because she's making noise. I'm the one being harassed here." Captain Dalton stared him down. "You're delaying departure. Either return to your assigned seat or you'll be removed from the aircraft." Logan's eyes darted around, searching for support. None came. Celeste didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She simply exhaled quietly and shifted slightly, preparing to finally sit down. But Logan didn't move. Instead, he leaned back into the seat, eyes narrowing. "You know what? I don't feel safe now. She's been aggressive from the start. Her tone, her body language. I'm not comfortable sitting anywhere near her." A thick silence dropped over the cabin. Celeste didn't react. She didn't need to. Everyone heard what he was doing. He was trying to flip the script. The moment he realized the authority wasn't on his side, he claimed victimhood. Miss Dottie Green, seated in 1C, slowly stood. She was tall for her age, maybe mid-70s, her silver-gray hair pinned neatly in place. Her voice was calm, but unwavering. "I've been watching this unfold from the moment she stepped into the cabin. That man," she said, pointing to Logan, "has lied twice and moved someone else's belongings without permission. He only started playing scared when he was caught. There's a name for that kind of tactic." The captain glanced toward her, respectfully. "And you are Ma'am Dottie Green, former federal prosecutor, now retired." Captain Dalton nodded. "Thank you for speaking up." Logan sat frozen, his face reddening. "I'm not going to the back like I'm some criminal." He barked, "You're not being treated like a criminal," Celeste said calmly. "You're being asked to follow the same rules as everyone else." Mark Jensen, the second flight attendant, returned from the back with a printed manifest in hand. He handed it to the captain. "It's confirmed. Warner. Celeste 2A. Pierce. Logan 28E." Celeste turned slightly. Her mother's voice echoed in her head again. "There will be moments, baby, when they'll test your peace. Not your strength, your peace. Don't let them take that from you." Logan still hadn't moved. He looked between Mark, Tina, and the captain, then back at the surrounding passengers. Some were filming. Others were simply staring. No one looked sympathetic. "Last chance. Mr. Pierce," the captain said, tone now stripped of all courtesy. "You either take your assigned seat or you deplane." Logan stood abruptly. His tray table clattered back into place. He grabbed his duffel from the overhead bin and muttered, "This is insane," under his breath. He leaned toward Celeste on the way out, voice low. "You people always make everything harder than it needs to be." Celeste didn't respond, but Marisol caught it on video. The moment he was gone, the cabin released its breath. The pressure eased. Celeste sat down in 2A. She took a long breath, adjusted her coat, and placed her laptop sleeve neatly back in the seat pocket. Tina approached hesitantly, eyes flickering. "Would you like a drink, Doctor?" Warner Celeste looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Yes, water, please." She didn't need to say anything else. Behind her, Miss Dottie nodded with approval. "Well handled," she said quietly. Celeste didn't smile. She just nodded back. But even as the cabin resumed boarding, a familiar chill remained. Because while she had claimed her rightful seat, she knew the real cost wasn't over. She glanced at her watch. 6:55 a.m. Her pitch to Westridge Capital was in 7 hours. The plane hadn't moved. And now, her greatest obstacle wasn't just prejudice. It was time. Celeste sat in 2A with her back straight and hands folded in her lap, her face composed. But inside, her nerves pulsed with quiet fury. She had won the seat, but the energy it had taken to get there left behind something heavier than pride. It left a fatigue she couldn't quite name, the kind of fatigue that only comes from fighting a battle no one else should ever have to fight. Tina placed the water gently on her tray table, her voice a little softer now. "Let us know if you need anything else." Celeste gave her a curt nod and didn't respond. Tina lingered, as if wanting to say more, but then turned and continued her walk down the aisle. Outside the window, dawn had finally broken over Charlotte. The sky turned a powdery blue, streaked with soft gold. The jet bridge was still attached. A baggage cart hummed below. From the corner of her eye, Celeste saw Mark standing near the galley, talking to Captain Dalton. Their voices were low but urgent. The door to the cockpit remained open. She checked her watch again. 7:01 a.m., 4 minutes past scheduled departure. She took a calming breath, then pulled out her phone. A notification blinked at the top of the screen. Noah just saw that mess on Twitter. "You okay?" Below it, a text from Noah Blake, her assistant, was waiting. "Noah, 6:58 a.m. Investors are asking for confirmation on your arrival time. They're getting antsy. Westridge's team says Apex Tech is presenting today, too." Celeste's jaw tightened. Apex Tech, her competitor in both product and funding. If they impressed Westridge before she arrived, she might lose the deal she had nurtured for months. She typed a quick reply. "Celeste, still at the gate. Confrontation on the plane. Man took my seat. Claimed it was his. Had to escalate to the captain. Delayed now. Will keep you posted. Before she could hit send, the cabin intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a brief delay before departure while we finalize a documentation review. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your patience. A soft groan rippled through the cabin. Someone in row 4 muttered, "Unbelievable!" Another tapped impatiently on the seat in front of them. Celeste closed her eyes. The captain hadn't mentioned Logan Pierce directly, but the implication was clear. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke gently. "Excuse me, Dr. Warner." "May I?" Celeste turned to find Miss Dottie standing in the aisle, gripping the edge of her own seat for balance. Celeste nodded, and the woman sat beside her in the empty seat across the aisle. "I just wanted to say thank you," Miss Dottie said. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for doing it with grace." Celeste allowed herself the smallest smile. "I wish I didn't have to. I had other things on my mind this morning." "I know you did," the older woman replied. "And yet, here you are, sitting in the seat you paid for, like it's revolutionary." Celeste looked down at her folded hands. "I was just trying to get to a meeting." "I know," Miss Dottie said again, "but meetings can be rescheduled. The dignity you demanded today, that's permanent." Celeste didn't reply right away. She looked out the window again. The sunlight was brighter now, catching the outline of a nearby terminal. "How many times do we have to do this?" she asked quietly. "How many times do we have to be calm, composed, correct, and still be questioned?" Miss Dottie reached out and placed a warm hand over hers. "Until we don't. And maybe today pushes us closer to that." Celeste held the moment, then gently pulled her hand back and gave a nod of gratitude. "Thank you." Just then, the intercom came back on. "This is the captain again. We're currently coordinating with airline security to verify seating documentation and finalize an incident report. At this time, we must remain at the gate. We appreciate your continued cooperation." Another wave of complaints rose. Celeste glanced toward the front. A man in business casual stood up. "Are we seriously being held here because of one guy who didn't follow instructions?" he asked aloud. "Let's just go already." Others mumbled in agreement. Marisol, still seated in row 5, raised her hand like a student in class. "That one guy lied, took someone else's seat, refused to move, and claimed he was the victim. That's why we're still here." The man rolled his eyes and sat down again. Celeste leaned her head back against the seat. Her phone vibrated. "NOAA 709 AIM. Westridge just asked if you'd be available virtually. I told him you're mid-air soon. Do I need to revise that?" She started typing. "Celeste, tell them I'll contact them directly. Give me 15 minutes. She needed to think. Another 10 minutes passed. The plane didn't move. Celeste flagged down Mark. "Can I speak to the captain directly?" Mark hesitated. "I can ask, but he's currently speaking with ground security." Celeste nodded. "Please let him know I need a word, and if there's a way for me to deplane without losing my seat, I'd like that option too." Mark disappeared toward the cockpit. Miss Dottie had returned to her seat, but gave her a nod from across the aisle. When Mark returned, he motioned her forward. The front galley was quiet. Captain Dalton stood with his arms folded, his brow furrowed. "Dr. Warner," he said as she approached, "I want to apologize again for this morning's incident. I appreciate that." "Captain," she replied, "but I need to ask, how much longer are we expected to wait?" He sighed. "We're reviewing passenger statements and finalizing a formal report for our records. Given the nature of Mr. Pierce's comments and the video footage, We're treating it as a potential code of conduct violation and a security issue. Celeste hesitated. If I leave the plane now, will I be allowed to reboard? That depends on security protocols. Once you deplane, it's up to airport authorities, but I can try to ensure it. She paused again. I have a meeting that could change the future of my company, a 2 p.m. slot. If I miss it, I lose $60 million in funding. The captain's jaw flexed. Understood. Can you escalate this? She asked. Push for resolution, I'll do what I can. She gave him a firm nod and returned to her seat. Minutes later, a new figure boarded the plane. A tall black man in a navy blazer with a badge clipped to his belt. He looked around, said a few words to Mark, and then walked down the aisle. Celeste recognized the expression. Calm, focused, used to situations like this, but also tired of them. His name tag read Marcus Hale, and he wore the posture of someone who didn't have time for games. He stopped beside her seat. Dr. Warner, I'm Officer Hale. I've reviewed the manifest and received the videos. You were in the right from the beginning. The delay is unacceptable. I'm here to help move this along. She met his eyes, steady, unshaken. Thank you, she said softly. He gave a respectful nod, then turned to the front to speak with the captain. As he walked away, Celeste finally allowed herself to exhale. Maybe she wasn't alone in this anymore. The hum of the cabin had shifted into a dull murmur. Most passengers were scrolling through their phones or huffing quietly, too polite to complain aloud but frustrated by the growing delay. Still seated in 2A, Celeste stared at the untouched glass of water on her tray table. Her hands were clasped together now, thumbs pressing against each other in slow circles. She had handled worse: boardroom battles, discrediting competitors, building Helix Technologies from 2 desks in a rented co-working space into a multi-million-dollar firm. And yet, this small, demeaning confrontation on a plane was the one chipping away at her control. Because this wasn't about business. This was personal, a violation, a quiet one, yes. But isn't that how it always started? She reached for her phone, intending to message Noah with an update. But her finger froze mid-air when another notification slid across her screen. Vivian Chu is calling you, Vivian. The senior liaison from Aero South Airline's Executive Relations Division. Celeste had dealt with her once before months ago after a conference snafu involving a reservation glitch. She swiped to accept, bringing the phone to her ear. Vivian, she said, her voice controlled but worn. I assume you've seen the footage. A pause, then a voice replied, calm, deliberate. Yes, Dr. Warner. I saw it 2 minutes ago. It's already trending on 2 platforms. I'm so sorry this happened. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment. Are you sorry because it happened? Or because it's public now? Vivian hesitated. Both. Celeste didn't respond. I want to assure you, Vivian continued, this is being escalated internally. The flight crew's conduct is under immediate review. I'm also authorized to offer you travel vouchers and a formal apology once the report is complete. Celeste let out a quiet breath. Her voice dropped. You think a voucher will cover what just happened in front of 50 people? You think a corporate template apology corrects the dignity that man tried to strip from me and the way your staff enabled it? Vivian was silent again. Celeste imagined her sitting in a corporate office, script in hand, wondering how far this would go. I've given this airline tens of thousands of dollars in travel, year after year, Celeste said. You know my profile. You know I run Helix. And still, I was the one questioned, not him. We acknowledge that, Vivian said carefully. "I'm working with our VP of Passenger Affairs to review not just the incident, but how the staff reacted to your valid requests." Celeste's voice remained even. "Vivian, with all due respect, review it faster and prepare a statement, because this isn't staying quiet." From the seat across the aisle, Miss Dottie glanced over, sensing the shift in energy. Vivian's voice lowered slightly. "May I ask what your intentions are?" Celeste paused, then answered honestly, "I haven't decided yet. I'm still deciding whether to miss a $60 million meeting or get off this plane." Vivian exhaled sharply. "Please don't deplane. If you stay on board, I'll escalate to Samantha Lou herself." That name brought a pause. Samantha Lou, CEO of Aero South. Powerful, visible, and extremely protective of the airline's reputation. Celeste narrowed her eyes. "I'd like to speak with her. I'll try to arrange a call mid-flight." "Not good enough," Celeste replied. "She needs to call me before this plane leaves the gate." Vivian fumbled. "She's in a board meeting right now. She can step out," Celeste said, "if she values the company she runs." Then she ended the call. Silence returned. Outside the window, a truck idled near the gate. The ground crew paced slowly, unaware of the storm unfolding just above their heads. A few minutes passed. Then her phone lit up again. Unknown caller. Celeste stared at it, then answered. "This is Celeste." A woman's voice, smooth and authoritative, filled her ear. "Dr. Warner, this is Samantha Lou. I was just briefed. First and foremost, I want to say I'm sorry. Not the PR kind of sorry. The kind that comes from watching the footage and realizing something is deeply wrong with how my staff handled this." Celeste sat straighter. "Thank you for calling," she said. "I hope you're not just calling to manage fallout." I'm not," Samantha replied. "I built this airline with the belief that people would be treated with dignity, no matter where they sat. And I just watched that belief fall apart in real time." Celeste appreciated the bluntness, but she wasn't in the mood for hand-holding. "What are you going to do about it?" Samantha didn't hesitate. "I've already placed 2 crew members on administrative review. Internal security is pulling audio recordings. And if it's found that they dismissed your claim out of bias or failed to act on clear evidence, they'll be removed from flight status." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "And the man who took my seat, he's been flagged permanently. If he attempts to fly with us again, the system will notify gate agents." Celeste exhaled slowly. "That's a start. I'd also like to offer a formal meeting between you and our executive ethics team," Samantha added. "Not as a PR move, but because I want your input on how to prevent this from happening again, not just to you, but to anyone." Celeste paused. That, at least, sounded like the beginning of something real. "I'll consider it," she said. Samantha's voice softened. "Dr. Warner, you were calm, respectful, and absolutely correct in how you handled that situation. You modeled grace under pressure, but it shouldn't have been required. I'm grateful for your composure, but I'm also angry you had to show it." Celeste felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. For the first time that morning, someone had said what she needed to hear. "Thank you," she said simply. They hung up. She sat still, hands still wrapped around the phone, eyes misted but steady. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Then, a ding overhead. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've now received clearance to proceed. Please take your seats and prepare for departure." The aircraft door closed, the jet bridge pulled away, and the cabin seemed to exhale. Celeste leaned back, buckled her seat belt, and closed her eyes. She had almost lost her voice today. Almost, but not this time. The plane had finally lifted into the sky. A collective stillness settled into the cabin as Aero South Flight 613 leveled off at cruising altitude. Outside the window, the Carolina landscape faded into soft cotton clouds. But inside Celeste, the turbulence hadn't stopped. She sat motionless in her seat, eyes fixed forward, mind far away. All the calm she had carried so carefully, the restraint she had measured word by word, was beginning to turn on her from within. She had held back her anger, her pain, her exhaustion because she knew how the world would see her if she didn't. An angry black woman, unreasonable, difficult, ungrateful. But her silence had cost something too. It had taken pieces from her, little ones, quietly, the kind no one could see, but she could feel. The way her jaw tightened, the way her chest felt a little heavier, the way her voice, always sharp and sure in boardrooms, trembled just slightly when speaking to authority. She took a slow breath and reached for her phone. Another text from Noah. Noah 749. Westridge pushed Apex Tech back 30 mins. You're still in the running. They're waiting. Want me to reschedule your opening slide to you instead of the full demo? Celeste stared at the message, heart pounding, not from panic, but from the weight of the choice. Did she go on like nothing happened, put her smile on, pitch her product, and pretend she hadn't just been publicly humiliated, or did she speak on it? Did she let her story take up space for years? She'd been told that dignity meant quiet strength, that being powerful meant rising above the mess, not wading through it. But now, she wasn't sure anymore. Her thoughts were interrupted by a low voice nearby. You must be so proud of yourself. She turned her head. A white woman in her early 40s sat in 3A, just behind and to the left. Business blazer, laptop on her tray. She wasn't making eye contact. Her tone was icy, measured, as though she had been holding the words in, waiting. Excuse me, Celeste asked, her voice flat. The woman finally looked at her. I said you must be proud, getting a man kicked off a flight, delaying a plane, disrupting everyone's morning. And for what? Because he sat in the wrong seat. Celeste blinked slowly. He didn't sit in the wrong seat. He took mine, refused to move, lied about it, and then tried to paint me as a threat when I called him out. The woman scoffed. I'm sure that's how you see it. Celeste turned fully in her seat now. Is there something you'd like to say directly? The woman didn't flinch. People like you are always looking for a fight, always assuming the worst, playing the race card, making it harder for the rest of us to just live our lives. The words landed hard, but Celeste didn't look away. It wasn't just Logan Pierce who felt entitled to a seat that wasn't his. It was also this woman. This mindset, this deep, corrosive belief that her voice, her body, her presence was a disruption not because she had done anything wrong, but because she dared to exist without apology. I'm not playing a card, Celeste said quietly. I'm telling the truth. And if you're uncomfortable with that, that's your burden, not mine. The woman rolled her eyes and turned back to her screen. Celeste stayed facing her for a long second, then slowly turned back toward the front. Miss Dottie, a few rows back, had witnessed the exchange. She gave a slow shake of the head, but didn't speak. Celeste could feel the eyes of the cabin shift again, the way they always did in moments like this, not with empathy, but with curiosity, with judgment, as if wondering whether they'd have to take a side. She returned to her phone and typed Celeste push the meeting to noon. I need 10 minutes alone. Then I'll be ready." She put the phone down and closed her eyes. A memory came flooding in. She was 12, sitting in a small church in Memphis with her grandmother, Ruth Warner. The choir had just finished singing. Ruth leaned over, whispering, "Baby, never forget when they try to shrink you. That's when you stand tallest. Not louder, taller." She hadn't thought of that line in years, and now here it was, a whisper in her soul. She reached into her carry-on and pulled out a small black notebook. The leather was worn from years of use. Inside were dozens of pages, some filled with sketches, others with quotes, others still with small moments she'd collected like leaves in fall. Things her team had said, things her mother had written, things she had overheard in cafes or on trains. She flipped to the last page and began writing. July 13th. Somewhere over Tennessee. I am tired, but I am not small. I refuse to fold inward to make others more comfortable. I was taught to let my work speak for me. But now, I see silence can be a betrayal too, not of others, of myself. Today I took my seat. It may have looked like 2A, but it was more than that. It was the seat my grandmother never could sit in, the seat my mother fought for, the seat my younger self didn't believe she deserved. I sat in all of them today, and I stayed. She closed the notebook gently and placed it back in her bag. Then she reached for her laptop. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. This pitch would be different now. It wouldn't just be about data or projections or scalability. It would be about what it meant to build something honest in a world that rewards appearances over truth. She opened the deck and began revising slide 1. Celeste's fingers tapped softly on the keyboard, each keystroke measured, intentional. She wasn't just refining her pitch now, she was reframing the story she was going to tell. Not just about technology, but about truth. Slide 1 was no longer a typical market problem meets innovative solution opener. Instead, it read, "When you build systems, you decide who they include and who they ignore." She let the words sit there for a moment. The statement was bold. It challenged, but it was honest. Every line of code Helix Technologies had ever produced was meant to serve, not to exclude, not to judge, and never to assume. She hadn't just created algorithms. She'd created access, clean energy for underserved communities, affordable AI systems for schools and hospitals that the big firms had overlooked. Her work wasn't flashy. It was rooted, and it had value. She continued typing, reworking 2 more slides until a gentle knock at her shoulder made her pause. She turned. It was Mark, the second flight attendant. His eyes were different now, softer, almost regretful. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said, "but there's someone who asked to speak with you." Quietly. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Mark motioned discreetly toward the rear galley. "It's another passenger. He said he didn't want to interrupt, but he saw what happened earlier." Celeste hesitated, then nodded. She saved her file, closed the laptop, and followed Mark down the aisle, past rows of passengers who were now pretending not to watch her. It was always like that, people who stayed silent when it mattered, but still couldn't look away once it was over. In the small space near the back, a tall, older man stood waiting. Salt and pepper hair, neatly pressed shirt, weathered leather notebook tucked beneath one arm. His presence was calm, but deliberate. "Dr. Warner," he said, extending a hand. "My name's Gregory Patel. I'm a retired civil rights attorney. Was with the DOJ for 22 years. She shook his hand. "Caught off guard. I recognized you right away," he added with a smile. "Read about Helix when you launched in Alabama." That solar grid project, you had half the legal world talking about it. Celeste gave a faint, surprised smile. You read that piece. I studied it, he said. And after what I saw on this plane, I want to thank you. She tilted her head slightly. Thank me for not letting it slide, he said. For choosing to stand when it would have been easier to sit down, to move back, to stay quiet. I've spent my life defending voices like yours, and I can tell you it still matters. Every time. Celeste felt a knot in her throat. His words shouldn't have hit so hard, but they did. Thank you, she said, barely above a whisper. It's been a long morning. He nodded, as if understanding more than he let on. Can I offer you something, he asked. I don't mean a favor. I mean perspective, context. Because the seat. What happened with Logan Pierce that wasn't about a mistake? That was about a system that still believes women like you are lucky to be seen, let alone seated. Celeste leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. I know, she said. It's just that some days, I wish I could just be tired without having to turn it into a movement. Gregory smiled gently. That's the cruel irony, isn't it? The more we achieve, the more we're expected to carry. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then he added, if you ever need a legal review team or public advocacy group for what happens after this flight, I know people, and we believe in leaders like you. Celeste touched her heart softly. I'll keep that in mind. He offered a final nod and returned to his seat. She stayed in the galley for a few seconds longer, taking a deep breath. Then she walked back to her seat in first class. As she settled in, Miss Dottie gave her a warm smile. Good man, that one, she whispered. You're not alone in this. Celeste looked out the window again. The sky was a soft canvas of gold and pale blue now. The horizon a slow burn of morning light. She opened her laptop again, but this time she didn't go straight back to her slides. Instead, she opened a blank document. She began to write, I didn't ask for a revolution this morning. I asked for my seat. But the world has a way of reminding you that small things are never just small, not when you carry the weight of others with you. When I boarded this plane, I thought I was preparing for a pitch. Turns out, I was preparing for a fight. Not with fists, not with shouting, with presence, with silence that says, I belong here, with truth that makes people uncomfortable because it asks them to look inward, and maybe that's where real change begins. She saved it, then moved back to her deck. When Tina passed again, she offered Celeste a second glass of water, this time without a word. Celeste didn't take it. She simply smiled. It was enough. An hour later, they were halfway over Kansas. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Noah. Noah 9:02 a.m. Westridge says they'll give you the floor when you land. They saw the story. Apparently someone leaked it to Morning Ledger. It's everywhere now. Celeste's stomach clenched. Her face, her name, her story. It was all over the internet now. She wasn't surprised, but she wasn't ready either. She replied, Celeste, I'll be ready. Have the full pitch deck and my notes lined up. We go all in. She sat back. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. A seat had been stolen. Her story had been questioned. The flight had been halted. And yet here she was, still flying. Not just toward Denver, toward something bigger. She didn't know what would happen next. Whether Westridge would fund her. Whether the press would twist her words. Whether the airline would follow through on its promises. But she knew this. She would not shrink. Not now. Not ever again. The plane began its slow descent into Denver. From her window, Celeste watched the Rocky Mountains stretch across the horizon like sleeping giants, capped with the remnants of spring snow. The city beneath them looked quiet, still, unaware of the storm she was bringing with her. The pilot's voice came on over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent into Denver. Local time is 8:53 a.m., and weather is clear. Please ensure your seat belts are fastened and your tray tables are stowed." She barely heard it. Her thoughts were racing too fast. Everything felt heavier now. Not just the situation, but what it had become. A viral moment, a corporate scandal, a symbol. She didn't want to be anyone's symbol. She just wanted to be seen as human. She had spent years crafting her reputation as a sharp, composed, values-driven CEO. But the internet didn't care about balance or subtlety. It wanted heroes or villains, saints or threats. There was no room in the middle. And yet here she was, in the middle of it. She opened her phone again. There were over 30 new messages, friends, colleagues, journalists, even a few she hadn't heard from in years. The headlines were brutal. CEO kicked from her seat by passenger. Forces plane to delay departure. Who is Celeste Warner, and why is everyone talking about her dignity at 30,000 feet? When race, power, and air travel collide. She rubbed her temples, overwhelmed. A ping. New text from Noah. Noah 854. The board is supportive. They're asking if you want to hold a press conference after the pitch. Also, Denver Post just requested an interview. Your call. Celeste stared at the screen. She wanted to say no to everything. She wanted to land, pitch her project, go home, and sleep for 2 days. She wanted to curl into silence and escape the noise. Let the media spin its wheels until they moved on to the next crisis. But then she remembered the look on Miss Dottie's face, the quiet nod from Gregory Patel, the eyes of the young black flight attendant who hadn't dared to speak up, but had silently aligned herself with Celeste. And she thought of her younger self, 17 years old, sitting on the floor of her college dorm, piecing together a scholarship application, telling herself she just had to get through it, that once she got the degree, once she built the company, once she became someone, they would treat her differently. She had believed that. And now, at 39, she was learning all over again it was never about how much she had achieved. It was always about how much they believed she didn't deserve it. Celeste blinked, eyes glassy. The plane dipped slightly, making a slow turn. She heard the click of seatbelts fastening all around her. Mark passed one final time down the aisle. "Dr. Warner," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." She looked up, surprised. "For earlier," he added, "I should have spoken up. I saw the tension. I saw what was happening. But I let protocol get in the way of what was right." Celeste paused. "You were scared," she said softly. "I get it." "But that's the problem, isn't it?" he said. "Everyone's scared, so nothing changes." She nodded slowly. "Maybe next time," he added. "I'll be braver." Celeste gave him a long look, then said, "Make sure there is a next time." He nodded and walked away. As the wheels touched down, a wave of emotion rose in her chest. This wasn't just a landing, it was a crossing, a point she couldn't uncross from, a moment that would follow her into meetings, interviews, boardrooms, not because she wanted it to, but because silence, from this point forward, would no longer be neutral. The plane taxied slowly to the gate. No one stood yet. The energy in the cabin had changed again. No one was talking loudly. Some were scrolling their phones. seeing the story unfold in real time. Others glanced occasionally at Celeste, trying to place the woman behind the headline. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Celeste stood calmly. She moved with intention, not rushed, not flustered. As she stepped into the aisle, Miss Dottie reached out gently and touched her arm. "Speak," she said. "However it comes out, just speak. We need it." Celeste didn't reply. She simply nodded. She was the last to exit first class. The Denver terminal was already buzzing, a few news cameras stationed by the gate exit. Airport security stood nearby, not out of concern, but to create space. Tina approached her one last time. "Dr. Warner," she said, almost shyly now. "Thank you for staying calm, for not lashing out, even when you had every right to." Celeste studied her. "You know," she said slowly, "I wasn't calm. I was tired. I was angry. But I've had to practice how to carry those things without making others uncomfortable. That's what's expected of us. Right?" Tina said nothing. Celeste smiled faintly. "That's the part I'm done with." She walked forward without waiting for a response. Noah stood at the gate exit, holding a tablet, eyes wide. "They're ready in conference room C. You've got 20 minutes. I arranged a press room nearby if you decide to speak afterward." He looked nervous, like he was afraid of what she'd say next. Celeste placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry," she said gently. "I'm not burning anything down. I'm just telling the truth." They walked together toward the lounge, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. For the first time that morning, she felt like she wasn't dragging herself forward. She was walking into it, whatever it was, not with fear, but with fire. Celeste stepped into the glass-walled conference room with calm steps but a racing heart. Inside, 6 members of the Westridge Capital Board sat behind a polished walnut table, each one mid-sip of coffee or scrolling a tablet. One looked up first, then the rest followed. Silence settled in the room like fog. Noah pulled the door shut behind her. She stood at the head of the room, back straight, her laptop in hand. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "I appreciate you keeping the door open for me. I know the morning's been unusual." Chuckles rippled, awkward but polite. She plugged in her device. The first slide lit up on the screen. Technology, bias, and belonging, the future we're building at Helix. There was a shift in the room, one of attention. This wasn't the deck they'd previewed weeks ago. Celeste didn't apologize for the change. She spoke clearly. "You know the headlines. You saw the footage. I debated whether to keep this meeting focused solely on projections and strategy. But then I realized if I do that, I'd be erasing the very values Helix was built on." She clicked to the next slide, a photo of her team, diverse, young, brilliant minds huddled around a solar grid model, laughing. "I started Helix because I was tired of being told there was no space for people like me in the industries that shape our world. Energy, artificial intelligence, infrastructure. Systems that touch every life built by people who often don't represent the lives they touch." She paused, letting the room breathe. "This morning, someone tried to take my seat. Not metaphorically, literally." He looked me in the eye and decided I didn't belong there. The airline staff questioned me. The flight was delayed. And now, the story is everywhere. Her voice never rose. If anything, it softened. And yet, here I am. Not because I fought, but because I stayed. One of the board members, a woman with silver-streaked hair, leaned forward slightly. Celeste clicked to the next slide, a detailed graph mapping Helix energy redistribution systems across underserved regions. We've expanded into 17 counties, with 60% of our clients below the poverty line. We don't just deliver clean energy. We train local technicians. We reinvest in their schools. We track outcomes. And we listen. She continued, blending innovation with values, business with lived experience. Not once did she mention revenge. Not once did she apologize for being the face of a trending controversy. Because this wasn't about a viral moment. This was about credibility, her right to it, and her refusal to let anyone strip it away. After 20 minutes, she stopped at the final slide. It was just words. We don't just build systems, we build trust. Celeste turned off the screen and looked at them, eye to eye. Now, I understand if some of you are hesitant, if this feels risky, but I ask you this, what's riskier? Backing a company led by someone who refused to be pushed aside, or staying silent while the world demands change? For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then the chair of the board, a tall man named Roland Mercer, cleared his throat. Dr. Warner, he said, that was one of the clearest, most grounded presentations I've heard in the last 5 years. Thank you for not sanitizing it. Another board member nodded. I came in thinking we'd discuss logistics, but this is leadership. Celeste gave a small smile. Leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it just doesn't leave the room when it's told to. There was a long pause. Then Roland looked to his team. Unless anyone objects, I propose we greenlight the first $10 million round by close of business. Full vote tomorrow. No objections came. Celeste exhaled, not relief. Exactly. More like release. She shook their hands one by one, professional but warm. As she exited the room, Noah was waiting, eyes wide. You did it, he whispered. Celeste smiled softly. No, we did it. Noah glanced at his phone. Also, heads up, there's a press room 3 doors down. They're ready if you are. Celeste looked toward the hallway, then out the nearby window, where a news van was parked by the curb. She hesitated. I don't know if I want to be the story, she admitted. But you are, Noah said. You just get to decide how it's told. She gave him a long look, then walked toward the press room. Her heels clicked again, but this time they didn't echo with loneliness. They echoed with purpose. The press room was small and overly bright, lit by rows of ceiling fluorescents and humming cameras pointed at an empty podium. There were maybe 15 people inside, journalists, photographers, and media techs setting up tripods, adjusting lenses. A woman from Aero South's PR team stood near the edge of the room, her smile tight and uncertain. Celeste stood just outside the door for a moment, watching. She took a breath, not to calm herself, but to remember who she was walking in for. Noah stepped beside her, tablet in hand. You don't have to say everything, he said softly. You don't owe them your pain. Celeste glanced at him. I'm not giving them pain. I'm giving them truth. What they do with it, that's on them. She walked inside. Every head turned. The room went quiet. The clicking of camera shutters started almost immediately as she stepped to the podium. She adjusted the mic, then looked up. Good morning, she said, her voice low but clear. My name is Dr. Celeste Warner. I'm the founder and CEO of Helix Technologies. I was also the passenger whose seat was taken, whose presence was questioned, and whose story is now headline news. A few cameras zoomed in tighter. Reporters poised their pens. I didn't plan to speak today. Not like this. But what happened on Aero South Flight 6113 wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger, a pattern, A system, an assumption. She paused. An assumption that certain people belong in certain places, that others do not. That confidence is arrogance when it comes in the body of a black woman. That standing up for yourself makes you a threat. The room held its breath. Celeste's voice never wavered. I was not disruptive. I was not aggressive. I was assertive. I asked for what was mine. I refused to move. And for that, I was interrogated, dismissed, and watched like a problem that needed managing. She let the silence linger. Some people might say, it was just a seat. But history tells us it's never just about a seat. It's about access. It's about dignity. It's about the way society polices the presence of those it doesn't expect to succeed. There was a rustle of movement at the back of the room. A journalist from the Denver Post raised her hand. Dr. Warner, do you feel that your success made the situation worse, that it threatened people in the cabin? Celeste considered the question. Yes, she said plainly, because people aren't just threatened by loudness. They're threatened by excellence, by composure, by a black woman in first class who isn't smiling, who isn't explaining herself, who isn't trying to make anyone feel more comfortable. The room was still. Another reporter spoke up. Do you believe Aero South's response has been adequate? Celeste paused again. I believe they responded quickly. But speed is not the same as depth. This isn't about PR. This is about policy, about how airline staff are trained, about who is believed and who is not. I hope this becomes a turning point not just for Aero South, but for the entire industry. There were nods around the room. She continued, I'm not here to call for boycotts. I'm not here to create division. I'm here because I know there is a young woman, somewhere, watching this story unfold. A young girl, maybe even someone who looks like me, wondering if she's allowed to speak up when the world tells her to shrink. She looked directly into the nearest camera. You are allowed. You are more than allowed. You are needed. More clicking. But the room had shifted. There was less performance now, less hunger for scandal, more respect, more listening. One final question came from a young woman in the front row. Dr. Warner, what do you want people to remember about what happened on that plane? Celeste breathed in. Remember that I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I stood. I stayed. And in staying, I reminded them and myself that I had every right to be there. A pause. Sometimes, the quietest kind of power is the kind that refuses to leave. She stepped back from the podium. The room broke into quiet applause, not frenzied, not forced, just enough to acknowledge that something important had happened. Something honest. Noah met her at the door. You did more than hold the room, he said. You shifted it. She gave him a tired smile. Let's go, she said. We've got more to build. As they left the press room, the sun was fully out over Denver. Light poured through the tall windows, catching the tips of her curls and the gold edge of her earring. She walked with purpose. The noise behind her didn't follow. For once, the echo was all ahead. The flight back to Charlotte was quiet. No reporters, no cameras, no whispers down the aisle. Just a window seat, a cup of ginger tea, and a view of the clouds, soft and unbothered. The hum of the plane was the closest thing to silence Celeste had heard in 3 days. She leaned her head against the cool glass. She hadn't opened her laptop since the press conference. She hadn't responded to the dozens of interview requests, panel invitations, think pieces wanting her approval. She hadn't posted a single word online. She had nothing left to prove. But that didn't mean the world had gone quiet. The messages kept coming. Hundreds of them. Some from strangers. Some from friends she hadn't heard from in years. Some long, vulnerable letters from women who had gone through the same. Others, brief but brutal, telling her she was dramatic, selfish, pulling the race card, that she should be grateful to even be in first class. She didn't delete them. She didn't reply either. She just read, let them pass through her like weather. When the plane landed, Noah was waiting at the gate with her overnight bag. His tie was crooked and his eyes were tired. "You okay?" he asked. Celeste nodded. "You emotionally know. Professionally, killing it." She laughed. The first real one in days. They walked through the terminal together. Nobody stopped her, but people looked, some with warmth, some with caution. One little black girl, maybe 10 years old, nudged her mother and whispered, "That's her." Celeste met the girl's eyes, gave a small wave. The girl grinned like she'd seen a superhero. Outside, the spring air was warm and damp. The trees were already thick with green, and a few storm clouds gathered on the horizon, but not enough to rush. At home. Celeste stood in her foyer for a long time, keys still in hand. Everything was familiar. The scent of sandalwood, the low hum of the fridge, the soft tick of the antique clock on the wall. But she was different now. She set her bag down, changed into a sweatshirt, and sat on the porch with her notebook. Not the one for work, the one she used when the world felt too loud to carry in her head. She began to write, not about the flight, not about Logan Pierce or Tina or the headlines. She wrote about her grandmother, about the stories she'd heard growing up of segregated train cars and schools, of standing in line behind white children to receive used textbooks, of fighting for dignity without ever being given the luxury of rest. And then she wrote, "I didn't ask for this platform, but maybe I've been preparing for it my whole life." As the sky darkened with distant thunder, her phone buzzed with a text from Miss Dottie Green. Dottie 6:02 p.m. "You held your ground with grace. That's legacy work. Celeste, I hope you see that." She smiled, then replied, "Celeste, thank you for sitting beside me when it counted." She put the phone down. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the oak trees along her street. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chimes rang softly. Later that night, she got an email with the subject line request invitation to speak at National Policy Forum on Transportation Bias. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she lit a candle, made herself a bowl of soup, let her shoulders drop. She remembered what she had told Noah, that she wasn't burning anything down. But as she stared at the flame, she thought maybe it was okay to burn a little, to warm others, to warn some, to light a path. A week had passed. The headlines began to fade, replaced by another scandal, another protest, another fire to watch from behind a screen. But Celeste Warner remained. She hadn't disappeared with the news cycle. She had simply gone home. Today, she stood in a small cemetery just outside of Monroe, North Carolina. The wind was light. The sun rested gently behind a veil of clouds, and the air smelled like damp earth and wild honeysuckle. She stood in front of her grandmother Ruth's grave, a bouquet of fresh marigolds in hand. It wasn't the first time she'd come here to think, but it was the first time she had come with a story that felt too big for words. She knelt, placed the flowers at the headstone, and rested her hand on the cool marble. "I hope you saw it," she whispered. "I hope you were watching when I didn't move." Her voice caught for a second, the words heavy with something too ancient to name. "I didn't shout. Grandma, I didn't cry. I stayed. She exhaled and sat on the grass. All around her were the voices of memory wind in the trees, the faint chirp of birds, a train passing in the distance. She remembered Ruth's stories, the ones she'd told with tired eyes and strong hands, of being asked to give up her seat on buses, of stepping aside, of being called out of her name, out of her dignity, and of what it took to carry all that and still rise to raise a family. I used to think it would stop, Celeste said, that if I just worked hard enough, dressed the part, built something good enough, I'd earn a pass. But it's not a pass, is it? It's a loop, a cycle. She looked up at the trees, and now I have to decide what to do with the mic they handed me, with the platform I didn't ask for, but maybe I was always meant to stand on. A breeze stirred, lifting her curls slightly. She felt a strange peace settle in her chest, not closure, but clarity. She stood, brushed herself off, and made her way back to the car. On the drive home, she played no music, just let the sound of tires on pavement soothe her. When she pulled into her driveway, Noah was already waiting. He leaned against the railing of her porch with a folder in his hand. "I figured I'd find you here," he said, standing as she stepped out. "You stalking me now?" she teased gently. "Only professionally." He handed her the folder. Inside were outlines, plans, legal briefs, proposals. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "What is all this policy suggestions?" Noah said. "For the Transportation Equity Summit. You've been formally invited to keynote. They want your input on national airline training standards, bias protocols, passenger rights." Celeste looked down at the documents, then back at him. "And you want me to be an activist. Now I want you to be you," he said. "But if you speak, people will listen. That's the difference now." She didn't answer right away, just sat on the porch steps, the folder resting on her lap. After a moment, she asked, "What if I don't want the spotlight?" "Then we do it differently," Noah replied. "Quiet power, structural change, maybe not marches and cameras, maybe memos and meetings, still justice, just your way." Celeste smiled. "I like that. My way." Later that night, she did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her grandmother's old journal. Inside were recipes, family notes, church rosters, and tucked between the pages, a clipping from a 1964 newspaper article. "Local woman refuses to move to back a bus." No name was listed, just a silhouette photo and a quote, "I paid my fare like everybody else. I have a right to be here." Celeste read it 3 times. Then she copied the quote into her notebook. She added her own underneath, "I didn't shout, I didn't leave, and I will not be moved." The next morning, she woke early. No alarms, no meetings, just purpose. She dressed simply navy slacks, a soft linen blouse, no jewelry, but a pair of pearl studs her grandmother had passed down. "By name." She stood on the stage of the Transportation Equity Forum in Washington. D.C. The room was filled with executives, policymakers, flight crew unions, and reporters. Not one of them spoke as she approached the podium. Celeste looked out over the sea of faces. She didn't smile to make them comfortable. She didn't soften her voice. She just began. "Good morning. My name is Dr. Celeste Warner. I am the CEO of Helix Technologies, a daughter of the South, and a woman who knows what it means to be told she doesn't belong." She paused, "And I'm here to say I do. We do. And it's long past time that our systems caught up with that truth." She spoke of dignity, design, and what it meant to build not just machines or companies, but cultures. Cultures that include. that listen, that do more than apologize. By the end of her speech, the room was on its feet, not cheering wildly, just standing, quietly, respectfully. She walked off the stage, head held high. Outside the building, a small crowd waited. A young flight attendant stepped forward. "Dr. Warner," she said nervously, "I just wanted to say thank you. I watched the footage on my break, and I think about it every day when I put on my uniform." Celeste looked her in the eye. "Then wear it knowing your voice matters, that your silence matters, that the next time someone is being erased, your presence can be the difference." The woman nodded, her eyes glassy. Celeste stepped into her car, exhaled, and leaned back. The driver asked where to. She answered without hesitation. Home. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like she was driving back to something small. It felt like she was driving toward something bigger than she could yet imagine. And for once, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't raise her fists. She raised the bar. Dr. Celeste Warner's story isn't just about one stolen seat on an airplane. It's about every unspoken bias, every moment of dismissal, every time someone's presence has been questioned because of how they look. And yet, through her calm defiance, she showed the world that dignity is not granted by position, it's claimed by presence. Her courage led not only to justice, but to a new national conversation about race, respect, and belonging. But how many others don't have cameras to protect them? How many voices are silenced daily on planes, in boardrooms, in classrooms? This story reminds us that injustice doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it arrives quietly, just like the power that defeats it. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or stirred something deeper, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. We have more stories coming, stories that challenge prejudice, celebrate dignity, and inspire hope, because change doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives with a whisper and refuses to leave.